Jai Baba. I wanted to start off telling you just a little bit of something. Yesterday I spoke and forgot to mention it. Michael asked the question if I had a background as a writer or a scholar, and the answer was absolutely not. I went to India just right after a year or two of college and started living as a resident in Meherabad. As I became close to Srila and Maranath's father, he showed me some of his writing work, and I liked it so much, and I liked him so much that I just wanted to participate. And it was working on all the different books of his was something just that I was very interested to have other people make accessible to other people and try to felicitate that. About the Mehera books and Sheila's book, it's you know, I still to this day, I have no feelings, and I'm not just saying this, that I'm a writer at all. It's just a matter of feeling that this story should be out there and trying to do it as well as possible. Something for Baba. And I think Duncan must have felt that way too. Here was a man that was very accomplished and he was a trained physician, but yet he came to India, he saw Baba working with the Mus, and he just felt compelled that this story should be told, and Baba encouraged him to do it. But I don't think he thought of himself as a writer either, even though he's a great writer. It's just a matter of seeing something that you felt you wanted to share with others, you felt that it should be recorded for posterity, and that's what he did. And that's what I tried to do with Mehera's book also. I was so touched by being with her that I just wanted others to share with it. So I was a little nonplussed when she said I was going to be talking about writing, because I don't claim any qualifications in that field. But I wanted to give you a little bit of background of how I got involved with it to begin with. And still, if you ask me what's my greatest accomplishment, I would say that it was going to India, and I'm still there. That's how I view it. It's like just to be able to be there and have remained there for a long time. And it's one reason that I liked Lord Meher quite a bit too, because in reading the material about the life of the Mandali and how Baba was with them, and just the things they had to go through. Everyone has to go through it with Baba in life in general, but somehow it seems intensified there, especially with the personalities that were present when I moved to India, and Maranath spoke about that this morning a little bit. So I'll start off by saying that when I moved to India, Lord Meher wasn't even translated yet. It was being translated, and I remember the person that was doing the translation, Faram Working Boxwala, was a very peculiar sort of person. He basically just wanted something to fill his days and do, and he asked Sheila's father to give him some material. Hindi was not his native language. Balji's writings were mostly all in Hindi in those days. So this fellow just wanted a pastime, basically, so he could remember Baba. So Balji had written by that time all the Lord Meher in prose in Hindi in notebooks, and this person, Faram, just asked him, give me that, and he would sit at his little table with his typewriter and just translate it. Now his native language was Gujarati, and he did speak Hindi and English, but not super well. Someone mentioned to me that he must have been a very academic, intellectual sort of person, and he was just the opposite. He was just a very funny kind of character that you would see in a Dickens movie or something like that, you know, reading novels, playing with little kids, had peculiar habits. But he was so devoted to Baba, and he wanted to spend his days doing something, and Balji gave him his material to translate, and he did it, you know, every single day for a certain amount of days, for years, so he was able to come across with something, and those pages that he typed were given to me to do the editing, and it was basically rewriting it in English, because his English was kind of you know, older style, British style. And then many times I would come to Balji and say, what is this? I can't follow it. And Balji would get the Hindi out, read the Hindi, and then he would translate those sections to me. But there's many problems with the manuscript, which I'll describe in a moment. the exciting part for me and how I really got involved was that the books that had meant a lot to me when I was coming to Baba were Purdam's book, The God Man, about Baba's life. I read several times, and just the stories and the life. So I remember seeing this guy, Faram, translating it every day and putting the pages in his desk. And one night I went in his desk and I took those pages just to see what he was doing. And I saw how Balji had written this book in conversational form and just the details of it. And I got so excited to read more of it, and to, it just resonated within me of something that I always wondered, what all these different stories, not just the main characters, but even the periphery characters and all of the people. You see in Lord Meher how many people Baba had contact with over the years, and somebody would come into the scene for a few years and then be maybe pushed away, or many people we didn't know about. Balji has brought their stories to prominence. So the material was given to me, but there was quite a few problems with it, and the several problems were that Balji had all his notes in English. Most of the material was already in English. The diaries were in English. And he translated to Hindi and gave this book to Faram Working Boxwala. Well, when he was sitting down typing it, he would just again translate it back into English, his own English. So I had all Balji's original notes. So wherever possible, before I even began to do the editing, I put the original English back wherever I could find it from Baba's words. So that was a large, you know how big Lord Meher is and how many quotes there are of Baba. So that was a big job. But as far as we could find, wherever the original English was there, I put it back in. And then, of course, Faram, when he was typing and translating, Baba would go to so many different places, and he never consulted an atlas of how to spell that name, or just however it sounded, he typed it. Well, I knew that people in the future would want to go to those places, and so it was important to spell it correctly. So I had to do that little bit of research work to make sure that everything was spelled correctly. There's so many names in it. Then he would spell the name of somebody one way, and 500 pages later be somebody else, and who knew if it was the same guy? So there was a lot of trying to organize the material with Balji's help, of course. Asking him points about that. So it was great to be living there and working on this right there with Balji. And that took many, many years. And it's still going on, actually. I've gone back to Lord Meher now. There'll be new editions coming out. It was given to a person in America to publish, and Balji was grateful to have his help after so many years. But that person took a little, in my opinion, some liberties with the material. So we're working to get a corrected, revised edition up, an online edition that'll be more accurate. And that's actually what I'm working on now. Last night you saw the film of You Alone Exist. And Balji himself translated that, and he translated it to me. I remember so clearly over the summer when the pilgrims weren't there, Balji had time because he was so involved with trust work. And he, one after one, he would bring out his manuscripts that he had done in Baba's time, and he would just sit in the trust office and translate it to me, and I would write it down. So I remember so clearly him translating this You Alone Exist and my writing it down, and just, it was going on and so many things. And then he told the story, of course, about how Baba told him not to change it, and Baba had given some of the lines, or most of the lines, I forget, but it happened again when when Bao told the story of him writing ghazals for Baba, and not many people have read those two books, Meher Roshani and Meher Sarod, but they're wonderful, wonderful books, and Balji did most of the translation himself. And it was the same situation. It was a summertime, and he would take out one poem at a time and translate it, and I would write it down and then edited it. And they were so beautiful and so moving, and he would, in a very dispassionate way, translate them. And they were talking about, there's so much turmoil, and the lover goes through, and his heart is, being torn out. But he would yet read it in a very dispassionate way. And I said to him, and he would describe how he used to read it to Baba. And once I said to him, "My God, these are incredible. Did you really feel all this when you were reading it? And how was it when you're reading to Baba? These are just, they were so full of, terrible emotion." And he said, "I never realized how, great they were until I had to read each one to Baba. And most of them have a line from Baba, a couplet from Baba in there. And he said he would be in Baba's bedroom reading it to him. And as he was reading it, whatever he was describing, the emotion would come on Baba's face. Baba would gesture as he was reading it, but not only gestures. He said Baba's expression was as if he was living what the poem was describing, which was, terrible suffering or being separated from the beloved. And so he said, when he was doing that, then he realized that the true worth of these were. And that's an important point of Balji's writings compared to some other people's writings. Of course, Francis was there and would read out to Baba, and his are, no need to mention how great his poetry is, and Baba himself said that, and when he would come back. But to me, like I said, Bao himself, when Baba asked him to write, said, "I'm not a writer." He tried to contact famous writers in India and wrote them postcards, and Baba let him do that. And of course, those people were not responsive, and they didn't have that connection with Baba. And so then Balji himself started writing. But the point about Lord Meher is that Baba himself told Balji to write this book. And it always struck me that the fact that Baba himself instructed Balji, who didn't ever want to do it, especially at that point in his life in 1968, that talk about writing Baba's biography started in October 68, when a man from Hamirpur came and told Balji there should be something in Hindi for Baba lovers. And Balji said, "I don't have any time now, don't even bring that up, because Baba will tell me to do it." That last darshan was coming. He had so much correspondence by then in 68. Baba's health wasn't good. And Balji definitely did not want to do any more writing projects. But when he went for night watch to Baba's room, Baba asked him, "Did you see this guy, Keshav Nigam from Hamirpur?" And Balji said, "Yeah." "And what did he say?" He was saying, "Yeah, there should be something for the Hindi-speaking people. There should be your life." And Baba said, that's true. There should be. You write it." And Balji almost never, said negative things to Baba, but that time he did. He said, "No, Baba, please, I don't have time. Can't do this." And then Baba kept quiet, didn't say anything. And the months went on. He asked Sheila and Marinath to send him a copy of the Ramayana, which Baba had asked for. They sent it to him from their home that Sheila's mother had brought from her father, sort of a family copy, like a family Bible. This is the family Ramayana. And one night, Bao took it to Baba's room. Baba asked him to open and read to him The Life of Ram by Valmiki. And Baba told him, "You will write better than this." But he kept quiet again. He didn't, it was almost a burden to him because he was so busy with night watch and correspondence. And also, like I said, he never felt himself capable of producing something like this. So he tried to contact famous writers. But the fact that on 24th of January 1969, just 1 week before Baba dropped his body, Baba was in terrible pain, suffering, getting spasms. And he dictated to Balji detailed instructions that he wanted his biography written. And it should be so many pages, and there should be a certain amount about his manifestation, about his father's life. And Baba's health was so critical, and each time he would gesture, it would be with so much effort that Balji didn't interrupt him, didn't protest anymore. He just listened and thought that later on he'll try to get out of it somehow when Baba was feeling better. So, of course, Baba dropped his body, and that was the final instruction to Balji, to produce his life. And it's just amazing to me that Baba himself prompted Balji to give this work to us. It's different than any other book, I'll tell you. Other people have written Baba's life, but it doesn't have that impact because it doesn't have Baba's words behind it. It has It has great meaning for the future. So it's important to me that that book be produced in a proper way. I don't think it has been, to be honest. And that's what I'm working on right now. You know, after about, it was many years later that Baba wrote the book about manifestation. And he kept saying Baba had told him to write it, and he meant to write it, but he just didn't get around to it. And I said, well, why don't you just talk into a tape recorder and just tell me what your idea is? Because he would sort of explain, he had been over the years thinking about what Baba's manifestation could mean. And that's how that book started. He made some tapes just talking about Baba's manifestation and then gradually filled it in. And the Avatar Meher Baba Manifesting book is important as well. It has quite a bit of material in it. I don't think it's been as widely circulated as it should be. But another point that I just wanted to talk about was what I call filling in the blanks. And what I mean by that is when you're portraying someone's life, of course, you can't put in all the details, all the filling in. But as those people who have traveled to India know, it's a very difficult country to travel in. It's, you know, and especially when Baba was doing it, when you read Baba's life and you read about Baba going to these remote places to contact musts and, you know, walking through fields, taking trains. As I read it, I've started to kind of fill in the blanks that's not there. And in other words, it'll say Baba went at 1 in the afternoon to contact a must, and he walked for 6 or 7 miles, and then he contacted him and he went back, and then he got on a train. Well, what I've started to do is try to fill that in a little bit, like that's hours walking in the fields, that's hours coming to a train station. And you know, like I said, for those of you in India, it's just so difficult, and the amount of energy and effort Baba put into this. I think it's good to use your imagination. Of course, Bauji couldn't, you know, he has to just put in the facts of where Baba went, but try to fill in a little bit more, especially during the travels, of just the time elements and the amount of energy and the heat and the dust. And, you know, Erich would narrate this in his stories. He was such a great storyteller and try to give us a little bit of that feeling. But, you know, I mean, there was no deodorant in India, for example, in those days. And it's, you know, stinking people crammed in a second-rate compartment. And Erich and the, you know, most of the Mandali were from middle-class good families. And here they were, you know, covered in dust, you know, soaking. Those kind of little things keep in mind when you read about Baba's life. You know, Baba was the height of giving in every breath that he took. And, you know, he underwent these sufferings for other people, the automobile accidents, of course, but and the contacts with musts. I mean, enormous physical efforts, especially, like I said, in a country like India and traveling. So keep that in mind when you read those sections, and look at the times and look at how many hours it was spent on packed trains, driving through the nights on terrible roads. And again, the heat and the little food, it was very difficult. As I read through, like I said, some material for Baba's biography, Chanji's diaries were very important, and Bauji made use of those as much as he could. But again, you know, there's the things that people were going through emotionally, internally, perhaps didn't come through as much as, because when you're writing Baba's life, it's important, the dates, the places, the names, that's all there. But there's all this other kind of color to somebody's life, the relationships, the things. For the Mandali, for example, I just want to read you one paragraph from the 30s where Baba is with a few of the Mandali in Spain. And to the Westerners who were there, of course, it's a lovely holiday. You know, we saw, there's some material coming out about Portofino where Baba looks majestic, and it's just they're, you know, in heaven with their beloved. But to the Mandali, it was a different story when they would go back to the room. So here, Chanji is with Baba in Spain, and two of the other Mandali members. And I'll just read you just one paragraph of it. It says, from 10 a.m. to 1:30 on October 31st, I think this is 1933, it was their last day in Madrid, and they went again to a park. Baba asked Chanji why he looked so depressed, but Chanji only grunted. The fact was that the trip to Spain had been anything but a vacation for the Mandali. Baba had created situations in which he embarrassed them, he teased them in front of the Westerners, and Chanji, Kaka, and Adi Jr. felt like they were at the breaking point, while everything seemed so wonderful to the Westerners. Chanji, in fact, had broken down several times in private and wept. Although Baba had tried to console him, he couldn't check his feelings. Baba would be indifferent at other times and cold towards him. And these terrible, what Chanji called his pinching moments, were filled with desperation and internal suffering. For the Mandali, staying with Baba was never easy. At one point, Chanji writes in his diary that they're on a boat, and it became so bad that when the boat stopped at Gibraltar, he asked Baba, I want to get off the boat and go back to India. And I'll just read you his short, brief words of that account that I read before, and you can try to fill in your own blanks to there. Because he writes it, of course, in a kind of shorthand way, but you can, like I say, again, read between the lines. It says, terrible time, pinching moments, intensive innermost sufferings for reasons of desperation caused by surrounding atmosphere and circumstances, which eventually tell too much, and it couldn't be checked, in spite of all his efforts to conceal it. There was an untoward breaking of the floods. Baba explains, means he tries to explain to him that that's his work. But explanations won't check the intensity of the inward feelings which overflow with the result, and he alone knows what he's going through. But, even though Baba didn't show it, I mean, Baba himself appreciated and knew what the Mandali was going through. About 10 years later, I'll read you another small thing. Baba explains to the Westerners about these true workers who lived with him and their renunciation. It says, public figures who, in spite of all their loud cries and sermons of service on public platforms and tributes paid to them by the press and the public, all or most of them have their weaknesses and vices buried underneath their public name. And compared to these loud speakers, my Mandali are jewels. Many of them are suffering not only physically, but mentally all the time. And mental torture is worse. They're human after all. They have a mind, and with it, so long as they are human and imperfect, all its weaknesses. They too have many thoughts of lust, for these always react with a vengeance when they're checked. And not being independently free to act as they please, being under orders not to put these into action is torture. Yet they all try to do it and obey, even during the prime of their life, when these are at full force, when life is truly to be enjoyed. And having spent previous years of life in my service in Savas under strict orders of abstinence and austerities, they still have nothing but a blank wall to face for their future, which they've left entirely in their master's hands for years. And they know nothing of it except his word and his assurance that it's all for their good. And there's nothing but abject disappointment as far as material or worldly gains are concerned. Yet they still hold on to the bargain and the promise they made by me since the beginning. That's for some great spiritual benefit of which they at the moment have not the slightest glimpse. So Baba knew that he was a hard taskmaster, and he did appreciate them too, but probably not in front of them, but to the Westerners privately. In my own work, in remembering Baba and working with this material, it's made me appreciate a lot more. And as I get older and see what, to try to see what the people who lived with Baba, like Sheila and her family, went through.
David, in Lord Meher, when I read the account of the conversation between the film producer Garrett Forth in America and Baba, I was really struck about the details going backwards and forwards between the two. How did those, it seemed as if verbatim Baba's talk was coming true. How did that happen?
Well, that particular material was taken from correspondence. There was Garrett Fort was a screenwriter in Hollywood. He worked on some famous films, and he came to live in India during the Nasik period. But he got very restless, and he, under the excuse, Baba was trying to produce a movie in those days, under the excuse that he wanted to experience the real India, he convinced Baba to let him go and travel around India. Of course, Baba wanted them to make, as much, take advantage of Baba's presence as much as possible. But this fellow wanted to go around, and he was restless being in this closed group in Nasik amongst people that he thought were not as sophisticated as himself or smart as himself. So he started traveling all around India. And once he left Baba, he would write very long letters to Baba about his thoughts and about, sometimes regretting leaving Nasik, and then Baba would write replies. So that material was taken from his own words in this correspondence. It's not given perhaps like Garrett wrote this day, or maybe it is, I forget, but that's where that came from. It's from correspondence. Well, that's a project that Buzz and Wendy Haynes are working on. Elizabeth Patterson took a very, maybe about a 5 minutes shots of Baba at Portofino, in black and white, of course, and when he was at Bandadra, which was a place in Maharashtra that the Westerners first came to. He called them to India in 1933. They thought they were going to live here, and they brought a lot of suitcases full of trunks, but Baba actually sent them back after a month. But they did travel. This is in India in 1933. They did travel up north to see some places and then back. And she had taken some shots in India at this place, Bandadra, and at Portofino. There's famous photos of Baba in a sadra coming down a staircase, beautiful, and that's in the film. There's about a 5-minute section where they've resurrected this film. And so they're taking that small film footage and they're expanding it to a more like a documentary about that time from people's diaries and photographs. I'm not involved with it. I just happened to see a rough cut of the film footage, which was gorgeous. There's so little film of Baba in those days. And Herbert Davey and Quentin Todd were two close disciples in Arena. And there's shots in this film footage of Baba kissing them and then other people coming, Baba kissing them. It's quite nice, but it's very short, but it's whatever we have, it's great. So it'll be coming out after some time. They may have gotten permission because the person that worked for Peter Townsend, Richard Casey, is one that had some of these labs, they're trying to preserve the film and make it more sharp and better. And he's the same guy that's involved with that. When Bao was writing the book, not only did he use all the material that he could get from the record room, the archives, the diaries, he also himself went to Pune and Bombay and interviewed people. And of course, Baoji didn't have a tape recorder in those days. So he took notes and they were in English, all his little interviews. And then he would later go back and remember them. He has an amazing memory too, and write it up. But it's basically wherever he could find material, he used that material. So that from Ramju's diary, Chandji's diary, Adi K. Rani's diary, even, correspondence. When I was given it, it was the same thing. Later on, more material came to light, and wherever we've been able to get it, we've used it. When Baoji was writing the book, he didn't approach it as a scholar, that he didn't have that academic background. And also, paramount in his mind were Baba's instructions to him. And Baba never said, include footnotes. Baba never told him, annotate every source. What Baba told him was, I want you to write my biography, and I want you to make it interesting. That was Baba's words. And that was always Bao's focus, was to put, like if he would hear a story, he would put it in conversational form. Even from the 20s, of course, Bao wasn't there, but he read the discourses, he read what happened, and he put it in a conversational way, which really worked for me, because, Sheila's book is mostly conversation from her memory, and I think it helps the reader, the immediacy, you're overhearing a conversation, and it really worked. So Bao's focus was not to produce a scholarly work. His focus was to produce something that people would find moving and interesting about the avatar's life and inspirational. Subsequently, especially Don Stevens, he's told me, you should annotate it as, and I told him I wish I had too, because sometimes I go back and I try to find where I got this from, and I didn't do that. And I'm trying to do that more as I re-edit it and as I go through it. But I said to Don too, there were so many thousands of sources, as I told you at the beginning, I went back wherever I could find the original English. I put that back in the manuscript to begin with. And I told him, in the future, everything's going to be searchable on computers. And we have to give the people something to do for 700 years. So let them be focused also on trying to find out, where did Balji get this, or where did I get it? I'm actually making more notes, because it'll be confusing to scholars in the future. They'll think, if something has changed between editions, did I mean to do it? Was it a mistake? So I've tried to make little comments like, no, I'm doing this on purpose. This really wasn't correct in that first edition. I'm trying to make little notes so when I come back and look at it, I'll know what's, what was the real situation. And it's a question, not only academics, Baba lovers, of course, want something that's authentic, and it's important that they, it's a certain amount of trust, I said to them too. You have to have a certain amount of trust that the author is conscientious and he's doing it. Bao is Bao. Baba told him to do it, and so we have to place a little bit of trust in that way. But I understand the other argument as well, and I'm trying to add a little bit of that and try to cite the sources wherever I can. Quite a bit of corrections have already been made, but it hasn't been. What happened when they put the old text up on the internet, for a number of years I tried to keep sending them corrections, but it just got to be too much. So I'm hoping to just totally replace that with the newer, updated material. And that's all something that I'm working towards. It's going to take a number of years, so. Meanwhile, whatever's there is okay. It's still valuable, of course. I try to do a little bit every day. I'm not an early riser, and so I get into I have an office at home where I work, and I can see Meherabad Hill from my window, which is wonderful. So I try to do a little bit. Start about 10 in the morning, break for lunch from 1 to 3. Work again for a few hours in the afternoon. So I'm pretty much a 7 days a week guy. We don't really go to the Pilgrim Center and hang out. We don't attend many events. Of course, most of the Mandali aren't there, so I don't really go to Meherazad much either. I don't even go to Baba Samadhi much, to be honest. We do go, but I don't attend Arti. I'm pretty much stay home kind of guy. I said, we're not couch potatoes, we're house potatoes. Well, it's just, it's like day to day, I'm with that material. I feel like, I'm just so fortunate just to be with Baba in that way of remembering him, of writing about him. It's just, I'm really lucky to be able to do that. And it keeps Baba's memory fresh and present. I don't find myself needing to go anywhere else or be with other people to get that experience. So I am really lucky. Of course, Marinath has to deal with all these officials and, Balji too. It's like, to me, that's torture. You have to, because if they're not even Baba lovers, they're like, but yet, it's great that they do that and they spend their time with them and they try to get the work done for the trust. I'm not involved in the trust work at all. And, it's just how things have evolved there in my life. Well, something like this, it's the really rough moments struck me, and also I think Sheila made that clear in her book too. where she talks about being with the Mandali and Baba just going again and again, just not nagging, but just saying, you know, what time did I tell you to come? 4 o'clock. Okay, what time are you going to come? Do you understand it's going to be 4 o'clock? Yeah, Baba. You know, it's like, it got to a point where they were polite and everything, but then after a while, you start getting a little irritated, and it's like Baba was tough, you know. He was tough. And not only that, even when other people were there to, like, you know, Jim is here, and he would say, you know, this guy, Jim Versina, you know what he does? You know, he eats like this, or he talks like this. God, what a strange guy. You know, in public, he would humiliate people, the close ones. You know, after a while, they got used to it. But at the beginning, it was hard. You know, they were embarrassed, and then, you know, there was tears. I mean, he would bring them to the point of tears a lot of times, even in private. And for these hardy souls to be brought like that, emotionally, it was just very rough. You had to become, like Baba said, like a stone where it doesn't affect you. And then Baba wouldn't do it, of course, once that happened. But that's what he wanted. And that's difficult, you know. It's really, it's not easy at all. And no matter if you think that it wouldn't matter to you, suppose you thought, oh, you know, Baba did that to me, I wouldn't mind. But he would find what he would know the point that would matter to you, even though you said nothing did. Suppose you were sensitive about something, that's what he would harp on. So one way or another, he's going to get to you, and that process of crushing the ego and breaking the ego is terrible. But after a while, they became so strong. That's what Sheila and Meredith are talking about. Later on in their life, they felt that they became strength, and that's what they mean by that internally they became self-sufficient enough not to care about what other people think. I mean, you know, that's one paramount thing. You know, everyone cares what other people think about them. It's natural. You want to be an impressive person, or you know, you're sensitive to other people. But those people with Baba really did not care afterwards. You know, they knew that they had pleased their master, and you know, they had that instruction from him. And not to care what other people think of you is enormously liberating for them. And that's why they were such strong individuals, because they had that. So, and it's not that they had liberty to do things. They had been trained just to only be sensitive to pleasing their master, to doing the things that pleased Baba, and to only caring about him. I mean, here, me, I can think I'm pleasing Baba. I don't really know. I just hope I am. But you know, am I really doing it, or is it really ego that's doing it? And not quite sure. They were sure, because they had been trained, and they had that lessons. So that's the difference. Well, I look back, and when I first went there, I just felt so at home with these people. I just felt so accepted by them, and I saw that certain things needed to be done. I started volunteering and working with them, and I just wanted to be with them as much as possible, with Balji and Erich and Mani. So I just insinuated myself into their presence as much as possible. I had two skills. I didn't have a college degree, but I had two things that I think really allowed me to stay in India. I knew how to type, and I knew how to drive. And they didn't, most of them. So I became Balji's driver at the beginning too, or taking Mani or somebody around. And also I could type, and they always needed, you know, there was no computers in those days. So, you know, I worked at the trust office basically typing the things. And I was very young. I was only 20 or 21. So I was like a young kid, and I was so green, you know. I'm sure I made so many mistakes, but I felt like accepted as like one of their children. You know, they were like, didn't have children, like the Mandali. And so I felt like that. I felt like they were training us, and I didn't have that close relationship with my parents. So I mentally, nothing was tying me to America. I was, you know, I didn't have that pull that I shouldn't move to India. So I started volunteering at the trust office, and like I say, it just felt so comfortable to me. I sanskarically, I saw what kind of people they were, and I think I had similar sanskars. Well, it's just, I just did not feel out of place. I felt so at home and comfortable there with them. And looking back, I can see now that I forced myself on them basically. So, as I said, I feel like my greatest accomplishment is that I'm still there. And what he was really thinking is, God, why are they like this guy? What are they?
You read my mind again.
And like, God, there must be such great people if they can like this guy.
Jokes aside, I saw how Eric and the others really embraced David. They really took him under their wings.
Yeah, I was not aware of that, believe me. I was aware of, man, I hope they don't tell me to go home, I hope I don't do something wrong. In fact, it's basically, I learned the way to survive there was, they always use the analogy of, if you see these horses that pull tongas in the bazaar, they have these blinders on them where they can't see anything this way, it's just this way. And that's really the way they wanted the residents to be there, with these blinders, and maybe Baba trained them that way. In other words, we didn't look about this other person got this or they're doing that and I should get this. No, it was, if you keep blinders on, I learned to do that, just stay focused on my little thing and not ask about other things or not try to get involved, just the blinders. And I think within the ashram, that's the way Baba trained them also, not to care about somebody else or think about somebody else, but just to stay focused in your own little things. But I made many mistakes, believe me. Well, I had, like I said, I read the books about Baba, and reading is one thing, but I had gone to Myrtle Beach and I met a few people in Myrtle Beach who lived with Baba, some old ladies, and they were such incredible individuals, and they really, were living the lives that such great lives by practice, not just by words. So when I had the chance to go to India, I met many more people who lived with Baba, and it just brought everything to life that Baba, was who he said he was, and they, just that personal experience. That's what I love, just being around the Mandali or anybody, even like Francis or Bill, or any of the ones that met Baba. I had that hunger to know as much as possible and to ask them as much as possible and to learn as much as possible from them and from their experiences. I was a good listener and I remembered things, and so that's what prompted me to go there. And then once I was there and saw it, and it was just like a cornucopia of information being given. That was one thing about taping Mehera, was that, Erich would be talking in Mandali Hall, Pendu would be talking on the veranda, Arnavas would be talking here, and Mehera was talking there. You couldn't be at all places at one time. So basically I, felt that I should just be with Mehera and do her. Somebody else was doing the other people. At the beginning of the first volume, each volume opens with a little vignette and a little paragraph of that time. And the one that was probably most meaningful was the one I used in the first volume. And Mehera told the story that she would, of course, deal with Baba's personal needs on a daily basis by keeping his towel ready, his soap ready, his shaving materials ready. And she talked about him going into the kitchen at Upper Meherabad, and there was a table like this type of height of this desk, and Baba would hop up there, and that's where he would eat. He wouldn't sit down at a chair and eat at a table. He would sit cross-legged on a top table like that and have his meals or talk. So she said one day he came there in the morning and he hopped up and he washed his face, he shaved. And she said that, he looked so beautiful in the morning and had just shaved that she couldn't resist just putting her cheek next to Baba's cheek. And for that one moment, Baba looked up into her eyes, and that was just so beautiful to hear her describe that. And you could just picture that moment of the two of them together in the early morning quiet on Meherabad Hill. And, that was the thing about Mehera. She was so focused on Baba and so appreciative of Baba's beauty. And you'll see this in this film of Portofino also. And you saw it last night in that film of the 37th birthday. Just the way Baba would walk was so beautiful. His gait, like a dancer. Margaret Crass describes him just his every motion was so fluid and perfect and beautiful, perfect human being. And Mehera was so appreciative of that, describing his hands and just the avatar's form as a thing of beauty was what I really treasured and appreciated. And you can see it in the films and the photos and certain photos, and hearing the descriptions of that firsthand were amazing. It was just, it takes your breath away because you can get a little bit of hint of that. I have 2 sons, and they're both precious to me. So I think that's the answer. They're you produce something and they're like your children, your little offering to Baba, for example. So in each of them, you try to do the best that you can, naturally. And, I'm not a painter or musician or sculptor, but yet I would like to produce something that moves people, that's can be like a work of art. And that's my little attempt to do that with each of these books. Sheila's book, I had a lot more liberty with. It was a lot more kind of fun, I would say, because I know her really well, and she has a very bubbly, vivacious personality. So with Mehera's book, I was very careful because you have to present Mehera in a certain way. You want to be respectful towards the individual that you're trying to give it. And, of course, I do have enormous respect. But Baba's and Mehera's relation can be misinterpreted by people also, and has been. So I was very aware that it should be presented in a certain way that people will understand it, and it should reflect her perfect love for Baba and as much as possible. With Sheila's book, I felt a lot more, not liberty, but freedom to make a more lively account, a more it was a different experience. Lord Meher, again, Lord Meher, there's certain things that Balji felt needed to be put in there. For example, like dates. People said, there's too many dates, names, places. And I felt like it should be somewhere. There should be a record, but at the same time, there should also be the heart, the stories. So I've tried to actually, what I had done originally was make a separate chronology of Baba's movements. Because I knew, like I said, in the future, people will want to trace those places. They'll want to see where Baba went. So a lot of the places have been separated into a chronology at the back where you can see all the places and the train stations they stop. It's not in the text. It's not in the narrative as much. But still, the facts should be there. So you can skip over the facts, and go to the meat of it. So I was working with different restrictions in each project. So it's difficult to say. Well, I mean, for pleasure, I like to read detective books and that type of thing. And when I became a Babaler, I got into Nero Wolfe. Haven't read him in a long time, but he was an American detective and a sidekick, and they used to always read these books to Baba. And I started reading them, and I really enjoyed them. The person who wrote this series of books about this detective, he's a fat detective and he has a sidekick, was an amazing individual. And that's the nice thing about Baba's life. When you read about things that touched him or that places he went to, you can feel that those people are blessed. For example, and that's one reason I'll tell you that I'm trying to do on the website. There's a story about Baba going to a movie in New York City to see the Marx Brothers. And it says that Baba goes to, I think it's the Ritz Theater or something, and that's all it says. Well, in just doing this research, I saw that this Ritz Theater in New York at the time was considered the most beautiful movie theater in the world. And there's a website with old pictures of it. And it's just this gorgeous palace of gold and, all kinds of decorations. And when you see these pictures, you really realize that the God-man went to this place and how blessed those people are that put their heart and soul into making this place. And he did that, wherever he went. So on the internet, I want to have a link that when it says Baba goes to these places, you can see those places and it'll bring out a little bit more. I mean, the people with Baba did realize that when they would take him to these different museums or places that Baba was blessing all those people who had put their heart and soul into doing things for God maybe, or just for their art. But so I also felt that this author, Rex Stout, who had produced these works, I I read a biography of him, and he says that he started writing these books much later in his life, and he says that the characters just appeared to him fully formed, and he didn't feel like he was writing, he felt like it was going on. When the first short story he wrote wasn't a detective story, it was about some Czechoslovakian immigrant family, but the name of the first short story that he ever had published was Baba. It's listed in the back of the book, his work. So that was kind of funny. But he was an incredible individual, and I have to feel that Baba got so much pleasure and spent so much time with his books that he was a blessed soul as well, even though, of course, he didn't know about Baba. Well, the story was that Baba was in seclusion in South India, and he wasn't seeing anyone. And it was a very strained kind of community relationship at the time. They were not Baba lovers around in that area. They were very, strict Brahmins. And so Baba was being very quiet in those days and keeping seclusion. But all of a sudden, two people came to the bungalow to meet Baba. And it's mentioned that they told Baba, and he said, okay, I'll meet them for 5 minutes. These two individuals came. One was an Indian, one was a British person. And Baba saw them, and then that's it. That's the extent of their meeting. And when I saw their names, I think it was Frank Watson and some Indian, not Homi Bhatana, but somebody like that. And it turns out that they were young men in their 20s. But later on, they became incredibly successful. This Indian went on, he's called the father of Indian space program. And he just was a student at the time. So Baba, even though the Mandali nobody knew who these two people were, later they became quite renowned. The British person became a famous art historian and curator in England. And it's mentioned in this account that, Baba gives them certain instructions, come back after a month or so. And, they were interested in Ramana Maharshi at the time also. So when I read about this person who many years later became a renowned art historian, it says that his papers are given to the British Museum, and he kept diaries of his time in India. So I was just curious if he had ever mentioned anything about Meher Baba. Well, I contacted the British Museum because they had all his papers, and they said, well, we have it, but we can't give it to you because we don't own the copyright. You have to contact his relatives. Okay, his wife is dead, and God knows if he had any children. It turned out he had an adopted son. I saw on the internet, I read about his life. He had an adopted son who was an Asian student, became a doctor, and was now living in Hong Kong. So on the internet, I looked in the Hong Kong telephone directory, and there was somebody by that name, and I called him up and I said, was your father this art historian? And he said, who is this? And I said, I'm calling from India, but the British Museum has his papers. I want to get this letter. I had asked the British Museum, look at this time frame. Is there any mention of Meher Baba? And they said, yes, there is, but we can't give it to you because we don't have the copyright. So I said, they have a letter. They're going to give it to me, but they need your permission. And it turns out he had become a very successful Hong Kong businessman and all this. And he said, sure, you could do it. And when you get it, send me a copy too, because apparently the father's sister is the one who had donated all these papers. But I knew when he had met Baba, and he was writing letters to his family, so I thought maybe he would mention this. And it turns out he did. He wrote a letter to his mother, and he said, do you remember you were reading this book by Paul Brunton called In Search and Secret India? And there was the character Meher Baba mentioned in there. Well, I happened to meet him. And then he just wrote one word. It was an amazing experience. And, just very briefly, that he, and telling his mother, who had read this book In Search of Secret India many years before, that he wasn't really a charlatan like Paul Brunton explained that he was. But that was very brief, and it doesn't ever say whether he went back to meet Baba again. Baba had told him, you come back after 2 months, go and see Ramana Maharshi. Never mentions what he did, but that was just an example of hunting something down, and there is a brief mention of his meeting with Baba, which I've done. So being in India has allowed me to pursue things. I mean, one of the major things that I I did over the years when I moved to India was contact photographers. I would, on the Mandali had all these old photos, and on the back of them or on the bottom, it would give the name of the photographer. So I would write to them, or I would go to their studio and look through old negatives, and found many, many photos of Baba that I gave to Hermes Ryder in Myrtle Beach, and worked with in Lord Meher. A lot of them we found just in people's sort of back cupboard, just by kind of hunting it down, doing treasure hunting.